Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Nerd Ventures, where I am recording at ungodly morning hours. It's repulsive to me. I don't know how this happened. It's before 10 o'clock in the morning. I am never up before 10 o'clock in the morning, but last night schedules got weird. I took a nap from 10 to 1 in the morning, and then everything went funky afterwards. So I'm up this morning. I'm already going. So why don't we take the time to do a little comment response from all of you friendly commenters out there? I am happy to say that in the time that I have started this channel, in the year that I've been doing it, I have been graced with some very loving and awesome commenters and fans. It goes back to the original intent of why I would even do this channel in the first place. I started this channel because a lot of the enjoyment that I got out of comics and any nerdy medium, the enjoyment that I got out of it largely stemmed from sharing it with my friends and discovering new things through them. And so I would like to think of this channel and this joint venture between myself and all of the viewers out there as that exact kind of thing, where I get something out of sharing with a larger pool of friends. So like I said, I've had a lot of awesome commenters, and I had a really nice exchange with somebody recently, and so we're going to talk about and break down some of the things that this person said, because I think they merit some reaction responses. A lot of times when somebody goes through the time to think about a comment and to put down like something that makes me think and makes other people that read it think, I really appreciate it, and I don't want to just throw something in the comments that is just like a quick offshoot. So I wrote back this person, said that we would talk about it, and I think it will be a fun episode. So today we're going to talk about this comment I received from Bob Ronner that says, "Another long and boring episode of Kick a Cat, Fuck a Horse." Wait, how did that comment get on here? That's not... Oh, I must have switched up the good comments for the really shitty comments, because I guess sometimes you can't understand how good you have it unless you read some of the trash in here. So let me get to the actual one. I'll be back in 1 second. So jokes and smiles aside, love you, Bob. Today we're going to discuss and sort of follow up a video that I did a while ago about DC Rebirth, which in that video, if you would like to watch it, I'm sure I can put links to it somewhere. In that video I mentioned, this was pre-Rebirth launch, and I was talking about how Rebirth had me pretty worried. A lot of the things that they were discussing, the formats that they were going to be doing, the turnaround on a lot of the books, the publishing schedule, and all of that kind of stuff, did not instill me with great confidence. Now, it's been a fair amount of time since then, and to be transparent and everything, I still have not read any of Rebirth. I have not read it. I don't read things in singles. I wait for them to be collected, so I'm sorry. This is going to come from a place of taking in what people have been talking about generally about Rebirth and stuff on the internet and online and in person that I've talked with people, but I have not personally read it. However, let me say, before I get into this comment that I wanted to respond to on this video, which was a really good comment, I did want to say first off that since making that Rebirth video pre-launch, I would like to reevaluate some of the things now in this post-launch world, because I think I was unduly harsh on Rebirth, and I have said this before in other videos. It's not like I'm coming out right now and saying for the first time, oh, I was a little too harsh. I've mentioned this before, but I do think that I underestimated DC for the type of interest, power, and ability to draw cultural zeitgeist that the company had by focusing all of their efforts on a more condensed and I don't know if specified is the right word, but a more condensed and sort of intakeable. I'm not making any sense. Like I said, it's the morning. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I underestimated the amount of interest that people would have and the amount of popularity, and I think the overall kind of quality that DC could put towards focusing the entire brand line at one kind of end goal. I think I underestimated that. You know, when I made the video, I was lamenting the fact that basically I was lamenting that fact that DC was kind of resetting all their stuff, and I said that it was aimed at kind of a legacy play to get people that were interested in it before. And I think in the months since then, we've seen Marvel go off and do... I have no idea. Like, Marvel's doing... It's so confusing to me. Like, they're relaunching again this fall with the all-new, all-different stuff after doing Marvel Now, but then they have some that aren't, and they have some books that aren't even related to any of those two things, and then they have other... It is like a whole scattershot spread everywhere. So that's, like, one way to do it. And DC, on the other hand, is kind of pushing down a very specific path. And, you know, months before, when I was evaluating it, I was saying that I thought that this was going to limit DC's creativity, and I still don't think that that's a wrong observation on my part. I still think that it is a valid thing to worry about, but I think I did underestimate the coherence that a line could have by being focused, and by a company kind of taking one track, whereas, like I was saying, what Marvel's doing is I think proving to be even more confusing and off-putting to some people, to a lot of readers, myself included, because it just seems so everywhere and scattershot and all over the place. So that was one thing. But I also do think that I believe, I mean, I would love to believe that I would be proven right in everything, right? Who doesn't want to think that? But I believe that what I said earlier about the artistic vision of these comics with Rebirth being lacking and not having an artistic cohesion, based on the fact that there are going to be multiple artists through the books, I think that is coming true, in my opinion. I think since Rebirth has launched, there have been books that people have gravitated towards, but I have not heard a single thing about the art on really any of these books. I mentioned the art on that Francis Manapul was doing on Trinity, but again, he's switching out with other creators. Eventually, he's not going to be doing art every time. And I'm sure people will come out of the woodwork and say, no, the art on Wonder Woman is great. The art on, Batman is great. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy it. Enjoy whatever the hell you want. But I believe in my heart of hearts that when all this is said and done, this Rebirth kind of first year of it, that we're not going to look at any of these things and see them as being aesthetically having like a very strong and like interesting through line in an artistic sense. Like, I don't think that there are any like superstar kind of creative duos that are coming out of this. Like, you're not getting a Capullo and Snyder, or you're not getting a Paquette and Snyder pairing from like New 52 or Chang and Azzarello, like where you had kind of an artist-writer pairing that was so in tandem and working and had art that was aesthetically complementary to the book. I really don't think you're going to get that from Rebirth. I think you're going to get a lot of stories with a lot of different types of art and very kind of generic DC style art, but I still believe deep down that that the art is not going to be as much of a forefront as I would like to see things in comics. So those are the two things I wanted to say about Rebirth before we get further into this actual question. Jesus, we're already 10 minutes in and I haven't even answered the question. It's a true Nerd Ventures video, long and boring, just like Bob said. So today's comment comes from Curtis Wood, who wrote a lovely 3-ish paragraph comment on my Rebirth thoughts and things. I'm going to read you the pieces as I respond to them. He says that this might come off as harsh. He likes the videos anyway, but he wanted to give a little idea about stuff. So Curtis, I know, don't worry. I don't care if it sounds harsh. I like to have some good conversation. So anyways, he's confused about my understanding of fanboys and fanboy-ism, because watching my videos, you look awfully like one. You can't have a giant comic book collection and have tons of knowledge about the medium without being absolutely obsessed about it. Perhaps this is just a misunderstanding on my end, but me being absolutely obsessed about a character and you being absolutely obsessed about a medium and someone else being absolutely obsessed about a genre is all the same. We're passionate people about something. So that was the first part of the question, is the issue of fanboyism or fangirlism or fanpersonism, depending on how specific you want to get. And he is asking me basically in here, as I'm interpreting it, in my DC Rebirth video, I was kind of slamming Rebirth as being aimed at DC fanboys. And Curtis is coming back at me and saying, well, aren't you a fanboy? Someone who has, purports to have knowledge and interest in this medium and is obsessed with this kind of thing. So let me differentiate, Curtis, what I think is the difference between fanboyism or fangirlism, fanpersonism, and the kind of love of medium genre and things that I attempt to have. The difference to me between them is that I believe and from now on, I'm just going to use fanboys. If you are a female and you're watching this, I'm sorry, I'm just using fanboys as a catch-all term. It's just a term, I'm not meaning it in a literal sense to exclude anybody, okay? Fanboys, I believe, when I use that term, I mean it in a sense that is sort of like religious zealotry about something, and a lack of allowing other opinions and viewpoints to permeate your own, and instead only reading, consuming, and arguing things which have confirmation bias towards what you are consuming. So, for example, I try my best, and I know I don't do this all the time. I'm sure that I have fanboy tendencies in me, and I sometimes will perhaps unfairly favor one thing over another. But I try my best to be agnostic or pragmatic, whatever sense you would like to say, about what I consume, and to give everything a fair shake. So while I would consider myself a fan of Marvel, I am not somebody who is defined by my love of Marvel and who will never let DC into my life, or Image into my life, or European comics into my life, or whatever. I consider myself to be a fan of good. I consider myself to be just a fan of art and storytelling in general in the comic book medium, with, like I was saying, with an agnostic view towards what company, artist, or character or writer I receive that source from. I know people, I've seen it online constantly, who are just die-hard fans about certain companies, who are just diehard DC fans, who have such a coloring on their vision of what they're consuming, that they only consume things that reinforce that vision, or when they see things outside of that vision, they shut it down. And so that's what I try to avoid. So like when I use fanboy as a critique of somebody, I'm kind of calling them out for being stuck in their ways, unable to change, and unable to view things outside of their own small sphere. Like I said, I'm sure I do that sometimes. I try not to. I try to be agnostic about it. And what you also brought up, Curtis, was you are obsessed with comic books as a medium. Are you not a fanboy about it? So what I would say to that would be, if I was a comic book fanboy, then I would be a person who says comic books are the best, and movies aren't as good because they can't capture the storytelling that comics have, and books aren't as good because they can't capture the graphic aspect of comics, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not that person as well. I love comics, but I also have a deep, abiding love for film. I have a deep love for prose and written work. I have a deep love for video games. I have a deep love for music. I have a deep love for a lot of things. So again, I try to be agnostic in my method of, I'm not sure if agnostic is the right word. I try to be open in my method of engagement with any type of medium and art. I am not somebody who will say like comic books are the best because X, Y, Z, films are the best because they capture blah, 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 blah. Like that's what I would consider to be a comic fanboy, is if you were somebody like me who only read comics, and then any other time you tried to receive input from another source, you would shut down and sort of be like, no, I comics are the best and this is why, and have arguments about that. So that's like my personal opinion, and my definition of fanboy is that somebody who does play, and you could extend this to video games, right? Like I have always wanted to play, Sega and Nintendo. I play PlayStation and Xbox. I want to play everything. I am just a fan of games. Okay, I don't care about where they come from. Like, I certainly have preferences. I like the menu system on the PS4 better than the menu system on the Xbox One. I definitely like I have a preference in that sense, but I do not, exclude myself from experiencing some things because they don't fit into my fanboyism, if that makes sense. And that's what I am arguing with DC and with DC Rebirth, is that The people that Rebirth was aimed at were those hardcore fanboys who were unable to input stories and stuff from the New 52, who were unable to deal with change, and who had to have a certain way with their stories and their characters. And that's what Rebirth was, in my opinion, targeting. It was sort of saying, like, sorry that we tried to change things. Sorry that wasn't for you, loyal DC fan, you. Let's go back to the thing that you liked. And that when I say it's meant for fanboys, that's what I mean, is that it was targeted at people who are like the hardcore, most religiously devoted to DC, and who have very little time and acceptance or interest in looking for, outside stories and stuff like that. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying if you enjoy Rebirth, I'm not saying that you are necessarily a religious fanboy who is shut off from other things. I'm not saying that. You can enjoy Rebirth and still be open to stuff. I'm just saying my summation of what DC is targeting with Rebirth is that idea, is going for that fanboyism play. So that would be when I was talking about fanboys in the video, that is my kind of definition of fanboys, and I mean it in a critical way when I say that it is somebody who is unable to accept and embrace media, genre, art, and things outside of their own personal kind of bias towards something. So that's my first point. One last thing, and this isn't the thing. Batman is Bruce Wayne. I absolutely agree that there's no definitive version, but strictly in the sense of a creative team behind him or the era/decade and micro characteristics. To say Bruce Wayne isn't the definitive Batman is a macro characteristic and frankly a misunderstanding of the character as a whole. Bold words, my friend. McGinnis, Grayson, or Gordon can put on the cape and cowl and call themselves Batman, but that does not make them Batman. If Bruce, wearing street clothes, was standing next to Dick, who is wearing the Batsuit, Bruce is still Batman. And this is where we get into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. Is there a definable Batman? In my argument, I said no. In the original video, I said no, there's not. Batman has changed over the years. Batman will change over the years. Batman was different in New 52. Batman is different now, and he was different in the past. And that people who try to hold on to some unchanging understanding of Batman as a character are limiting themselves and their ability to consume new and interesting stories by having these preconceived notions about what Batman is. That was my general argument. Curtis, on the other hand, is coming out and saying that there is a definable Batman, and that Batman is Bruce Wayne. That Bruce Wayne is the definition of Batman. And this gets down to, like I said, metaphysical arguments. And unfortunately, Curtis is not here with me to go back and forth on, but I'm just going to put out the question to people out there, because this has been an understanding of mine for a while. Can you define yourself? What can you point to that is you? Is it a physical aspect? Will you say, I am 6 foot 2 inches tall, right? I'm 200 and whatever pounds. I am, I live in Delaware. I speak English. I like Chinese food. Okay? There's tons of incidentals that you can put out there, but does that mean that if any of those things change, that are you still the same person? Right? If you move to a different state, is that still the same person? If you have some accident and now you're 5 foot tall or whatever, you had a leg cut off, whatever, are you still the same person? If you have any physical characteristics about you change, if you say, I have a full head of hair, I have a beard, if I shave my beard, am I no longer me? So my counter would be anything physical that you point to, anything at all, they're just incidental sets that don't actually define anything. Now, they are a convenient societal marker for us to say, oh, that person fills, 20 different things that I understand about them, therefore they are my friend Chris, because that is how I understand Chris to be. But that doesn't mean that if Chris changes any of his physical aspects, that he's no longer Chris to us, right? So we are, like, as a human, an amalgamation of physical things. We're also an amalgamation of emotional and mental things. Wait, this is getting, like, super out there, right? But again, none of them are permanent. None of them are definable. None of them are finite, right? No, or infinite, that is. All of them are in constant flux and in constant change. And the same thing with Batman, right? Anything that you point to with Batman at any point, if you told me Batman is Bruce Wayne, I'll say, no, there have been Batmans who are not Bruce Wayne anymore, right? That's been written in tons of stories. And I could write it in another story, and you could write it too. If you wanted to say Batman is set in Gotham, I could say, no, there have been stories where Batman is not set in Gotham, and I could write a story where Batman is not set in Gotham. My point is that I really and truly do not believe that there is a definite Batman, okay? And I don't believe that there's a definitive will, right? This is my, like, metaphysical view of the universe. It comes, I guess, mostly from an understanding of Buddhism, but just from my, like, what I've read and understood growing up and going through school and college and stuff. I don't believe that there is a finite anything, to be honest with you. I don't believe, I think everything around us, we are just giving words to make perceptible, but I don't think that they exist in a true form. So the sense that, you could say, I am this, I am that. Every time you define yourself as something, those things that you use as definitions can change. They will change. You won't always be healthy. Someday you'll be sick. Someday you'll be dead. Someday you'll be old. You'll be young at some point in your life. You'll have hair. You won't have hair. You'll be mean. You'll be nice. Everything about you is in flux. Just like everything about every character is in flux, right? Everything about the Flash is in flux. I could change him. You could change him. People at DC can change him. He is not one thing. Nor is Batman. Nor is anything, in my opinion. So the reason that I'm bringing this up in the context of comics is because I believe that this characteristic, this need to hold on and to define something as something that is unchanging, the need for humans and comic book fans in a smaller sense to look out and say that, yes, there is a Batman and I understand it and it's unchanging. I believe that that holds us back from so many things and from the ability to make and create so many interesting stories. And I think that that's, like, really unfortunate in the sense that there's so many cool things that could be told with that character, with Batman. But there's always a lot of people, whenever chances are taken, whenever things change, like they do in the world, everything changes. Whenever things change, people are quick to point and say, that's not Batman. That's not Batman. Batman wouldn't do that. Batman doesn't do that. That's not something Batman would say. But there is no Batman in my perspective. That's what I'm saying. There is no Batman because Batman is nothing. He's a set of images, masks, icons, but those things all change. Everything changes, right? And so when you say, like, let's say there's a new Lord of the Rings movie made, right? And somebody says, like, oh, it was a good sci-fi movie, but it wasn't Lord of the Rings. But what is Lord of the Rings? It is nothing. It is not an actual thing. It's just a series of images which we, in our attempt to understand it, will give form to, but in reality it's formless. Again, I'm sorry if you're getting turned off by this. I'm probably going to lose some subscribers from this video. But that is my understanding of metaphysics in the world, is that everything is in flux and in change. Nothing stays the way it is. And so my reasoning for making this video is to implore everybody to think about that when you're reading stuff. And when you have a response to something and say, oh, this Daredevil story, this isn't what Daredevil would do. This isn't Daredevil. But why isn't it? Really think about that. Why do you think it's not Daredevil? And is there anything essential that is Daredevil? Because isn't the world and the number of stories in the world, isn't it so much more interesting if we can allow things to change, right? It's the same thing with relationships with other human beings, right? Maybe you had a relationship with somebody 5 years ago. You see them again 5 years from now. A large part of the kind of maybe pain that you get from interacting with them now is that you still see them as the person they were 5 years ago, and you want them to be that person. And you interact with them in a way that you think makes sense for who they were 5 years ago, but they've changed. They're not that person anymore. And I think that is like a very true thing about human interactions in general, that a lot of the pain and misunderstandings that humans go through between each other is due to the fact that we don't allow each other to change. We don't allow each other the the ability to say, I'm not the person I was a year ago. I'm not even the person I was 5 minutes ago. I'm not the person I was a week ago. I am in constant flux, and take me as I am and as I am becoming to be. Wow, this is so pretentious. But instead, when we try to pin somebody down and say, no, you are this, you should behave like this because I understand, Americans to behave like this. That's an unfair thing, I think, to put on anybody. I think any type of labels and defining characteristics, it's restrictive for who somebody is, can be, and will change into. So ultimately, what I'm trying to say with all of this is, let these characters change and grow and be interesting and be different. If you try to lock them down to definitive ideas of who the characters are, all you're doing is causing, you're causing yourself and other people, I think, to kill the enjoyment of something you could be enjoying because you are sticking with a rigid structure that you're creating to put on something that doesn't really exist, is what I'm trying to say. That everything is in flux, everything is in change, enjoy the change while it goes, and rightly criticize something. If you don't like the art in something, I think it's totally fair to criticize it. But in my opinion, it's not fair to say that this isn't Batman art. That's not a fair criticism, because there is no such thing as Batman art. You can say that I don't enjoy this because X, Y, and Z, things that maybe the line is thicker than I like to look at. That's totally cool. But if you are finding yourself held back and only enjoying things that conform with an idea that you have of what Batman is, or conform with an idea that you have of what DC should be making, then all you're doing is holding yourself back from experiencing a wealth of information and knowledge and just growing as a fan of comic books and a fan of everything else. Again, I'm not expecting many people to really be that interested in talking about this kind of stuff, but it's the kind of conversations that I really like to have, and it's my kind of personal understanding of the way the universe works, is that everything is in flux, everything is changing, nothing actually is, and when we as people try to control, confine, and put structure and define things, that all it's doing is causing undue, dislike, discomfort, and pain in our attempt to confine things to these, rigid states. I hope that made some sort of sense. If you made it to the end of this video, kudos on you. If you didn't and you unsubscribed, I understand. Not everybody comes to comic book channels to get super wordy, long form metaphysical bullshit from some guy who you don't know outside of YouTube, but I think it's really interesting to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please, feel free to, I don't know if video responses still exist on YouTube, but I would love to see somebody make a video response to this video. Tell me why you think maybe I'm incorrect or correct or whatever. But yeah, that's sort of what I wanted to leave you with, is sort of this understanding of maybe don't try to define something as strictly, because every time you define something, it inevitably will slip through your fingers and change. And let's try to let the idea of Batman breathe a little more, and maybe accept a lot of different Batmans, because they can all be interesting. That's all I'm saying, is thinking that something is one thing. I just find it to be a very restrictive and confining idea of the world. So yeah, Nerd Ventures signing off. Hope you guys have a great day. I promise after this video that we'll be back to more previews and like a little bit more factually grounded comic book talk. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you guys in the next one.